Hey, welcome to Haphazard Homestead. Do you see it? Do you see it? That wild field mustard. One of my top 10 wild greens of all time. If you watch this video all the way through and get to know this great plant and how you can use it, field mustard may end up being one of your favorites too. Field mustard is in the mustard family, also known as the brassicas or crucifers. There are a lot of edible mustards out there. They all taste a little different. I'll cover some of them in future videos. I do have a video already on bittercress, one of the tiny tasty plants of the mustard family. But in this video, I'm talking here about the field mustard, Brassica Rapa. Its closest relatives are not the mustard greens you find at the store. The field mustard is actually what was domesticated into turnips, Napa cabbage, and rapini. And to me, that's crazy. Those plants don't even look like each other, and they sure don't look like field mustard out in the wild. Just looking at these leaves, field mustard seems so nondescript. How can anybody ever identify it? But there are some easy ways to get started. The bottom leaves of field mustard can get big. They have a big lobe and 1 to 4 smaller side lobes, and in my experience, they often have these little raised dots that can make the leaves a little rough. But as the plants get older and send up their flower stalks, the upper leaves get smaller without any of those lobes. These upper leaves have a pointed tip and they have a clasp around the stem, around the flower stalk. That's distinctly different than other mustards. When the flower buds open up, they are bright yellow and look like any other flower on a broccoli, kale, cabbage, or collard that's going to seed. The flowers are in a cluster, and each flower has 4 bright yellow petals in a simple square. When field mustard is in flower, it's easy to see, even driving on a highway at 60 miles an hour. Those yellow flowers just holler out, "Come check me out!" And finding one good-sized patch is like finding a $20 bill. There is so much good eating. There's no worry about harvesting too much because in North America it's an introduced plant, and in some states it's even classified as an invasive noxious weed. So harvest away. Once you recognize wild field mustard, you start to see it in a lot of disturbed areas in the late winter and early spring, even before it flowers. The plants won't always be big, but there can be a lot of them in one spot. Field mustard is a common weed in many gardens, including my own. But that's okay by me, because it means I have some good eating way before garden season even starts. And the harvest season is long, because I can harvest the big lower leaves, the flower stalks and the upper leaves, and even the flower buds and the flowers. And I can go back to the same plants and cut over and over and over again. So, finding a patch of wild field mustard is really worth something and can provide a lot of food. Taking the field mustard back to the kitchen, we can be dealing with several different parts of the plant. By treating each different part in its own way, we can get a real variety of food. I like to handle the big lower leaves separately. Here, you can see their lobes and those dots and the roughness on the lower leaves. There's nothing wrong with those leaves. The dots and the roughness is the way that they're supposed to be. If the center ribs are tough, I just strip them out like in my video on monster dandelion greens. On the other end of the plant are the flowers. You can see their buds and flowers look just like rapini or broccoli rabe, or really like any of the other plants in the mustard family when they flower. These flowers are not at all hot. Those flowers are delicate enough to keep in a separate container in the refrigerator where they will last for a few days. Then there's the middle part of the plant, the flower stalk and the leaves and buds attached to it. I take the leaves off the flower stalks so I can use those stalks separately. I check to be sure the stalks are still tender and not tough. I can just use that as is. Depending on their size, I put the trimmed off leaves over in my pile of the big leaves from the base of the plant, or I put them in with the tops of the flower stalks. Those tops are just like rapini or broccoli rabe, the thin, tiny broccoli that are on the menu at fancy restaurants. Hank Holly, the Northwest Forager, left a comment about wild field mustard on my last video on picking weeds for early spring salad. Hank says, "One of my favorite spring greens is the field mustard. I really enjoy the flower buds." I agree with Hank. Those flower buds at the top of the stalk are really tasty, but I like all the parts of the wild field mustard. When all the trimming is done, I have at least 4 parts of the wild field mustard that I can use in different ways. The big coarse lower leaves, the tender flower stalks, the flowers, and the tops of the flower stalks with their unopened buds. The flowers are great in spring salads made out of weeds or leaves from the trees. You can check out my video on making weed salads, and I'll be posting one on using tree leaves pretty soon too. I use the flower stalk tops just like rapini or little broccolis, or like flowering stalks on collards in the spring. Check out my collard stalk video for more about that if you want to get some ideas. I use the big leaves just like collards or turnip greens. Field mustard is not as sweet and mild as collard greens, but they're not hot and spicy like garden mustard greens either. And wild field mustard are not bitter, which some folks don't like about other wild greens. I freeze the mustard greens in the same way that I freeze collard greens, and you can go check out my video on picking and freezing collards if you're interested in that. Those naked field mustard stalks are tasty in a lot of ways, but pickled mustard green stalks are incredibly good. I'll be putting up a video that shows a super easy way to pickle those stalks, so stay tuned by subscribing to my channel if you haven't already. I hope this video has helped you understand and appreciate what an amazing weed the wild field mustard is. It can be real food for regular people. It's one of my top 10 favorite wild greens of all time. It's as good as any green in a grocery store. What do you think about wild field mustard? Does it grow near you? Let me know in the comments below. And if you use wild field mustard, let me know what you do with it. I believe that we can all have lives that are richer, more secure, more grounded, and more interesting by getting to know the plants and the land around us. I want to thank Klutzy Gardener for helping to pick some of the field mustard greens. I hope things are going well at your place, and thanks for stopping by. And I hope you're subscribed to my channel with a little different view about living close to the land. Bye.